Howdy, folks. Welcome to the Podcast Iron. My name is Laura Mullen Vermilia, and on this podcast, I interview members of the cast iron art community in order to inspire, educate, and spread ideas about iron casting and cast iron art. I am very excited to tell you that our guest today is Coral Penelope Lambert. Coral is a professor of sculpture at Alfred University and also the director of the National Casting Center Foundry. Her work includes cast and fabricated metal, among other materials, and her work takes many forms, sometimes large outdoor sculptures, sometimes more intimately sized pieces. In this interview, she describes how she became an artist and where her life journey has taken her up until this point. Coral, I had been looking forward to this chat with you for a long time, and you definitely did not disappoint me. I enjoyed hearing your story so much. With every twist and turn of your journey, I was on the edge of my seat, and I know that many other people will also enjoy hearing you recount this story now and for years to come. And just one small, quick spoiler to everyone who's listening to this episode. In September of 2023, Coral will have an amazing performance at the Festival of Combustion, and that is hosted by the Cary Blast Furnaces in Pennsylvania. The date is coming up soon. It will be Saturday, October 7th, 2023. So we're about a month away. And if you're able to make it, I urge you to head to Cary Blast Furnaces because not only is it an amazing historic site, and the Festival of Combustion is a great overall event, but by what Coral describes, it sounds like her performance will be the experience of a lifetime to witness. So if you want more info, just Google Cary Blast Furnaces or Festival of Combustion or riversofsteel.com, and you'll find all the details on their website. And in this interview, Coral describes exactly what the performance is, so I'm not going to tell you now, but I just wanted to get the date of the event into your consciousness as early as I could so that you attend. But now that that's done, let's carry on. The Podcast Iron Show is sponsored in part by individual supporters on Patreon. So yes, that's about 20 of our friends, colleagues, and other professionals in the field. So thank you to everyone who has joined as a Patreon member to help me afford the production costs of keeping this show going. And I'd also like to thank the top supporters of the show, which are Crescent Creative, the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance, and Sloss Metal Arts. And I'm so grateful to all of these top supporters. I want to tell you a little bit more about each one individually. Crescent Creative is a digital design and fabrication studio located in Birmingham, Alabama. They utilize CNC router technology to produce foundry patterns, outdoor signage, furniture, and public art commissions. So if you have questions, they definitely have solutions. You can find them on Instagram at Crescent Creative. So check them out, give them a follow. They're always creating interesting and artistic custom designs for their customers, and I love seeing their projects pop up on my Instagram feed. Thank you so much, Crescent Creative, for becoming a top sponsor. Your support really means so much to us. Another top supporter of the show is the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance, and they are a 501c3 nonprofit organization that consists of iron casting artists in the western states of the U.S. Their organization's goals are to educate, demonstrate, and exhibit cast iron art in the western region of the U.S. And one way they accomplish this goal is by organizing a conference every 2 years. So start planning to come out west for the conference in the fall of 2024. So about a year away. Typically, it's at the beginning of October, but not always, so just keep your ear to the ground. Obviously, there are no solid dates this far in advance, but I'll keep you informed when things start to develop. Rumor has it that the 2024 Western Conference will be in San Diego, California, and folks, that's almost as west as it gets, so let's get out there. And I just want to point out that you don't have to live in the West to attend the Western Conference. You should definitely make the trip. They'll love to have you. So a big thanks to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance and their board members for their support of this podcast. For more information about this fantastic organization, visit their website, which is wciaa.org. And another top supporter of this show is Sloss Metal Arts, which is a national center for iron casting and metal art. Based in Birmingham, Alabama, they host our national conference on contemporary cast iron art and practices, and that's every 2 years. So to keep up to date on the national conference related things, follow NCCCIAP on Instagram, but also follow Sloss Metal Arts on Instagram and TikTok, and they'll keep you up to date on all things Sloss related and conference related. And besides the national conference, Sloss Metal Arts also has a full year-round schedule, including cast iron bowl making events, and the foundry is available to be rented out if you want to bring your class there or host an event with their artists. So for more information about the Sloss Metal Arts program, visit their website, which is slossmetalarts.com. Thank you, Sloss Metal Arts. And one more thing before we get into the interview, I just want to mention an upcoming opportunity for the display of your large outdoor artwork. The city of O'Fallon, Missouri hosts a rotating sculpture series called The Shape of Community, and they've provided me with this exciting and informative clip to show you, so let's watch it now.
If you're an artist or know someone who is, become a part of O'Fallon, Missouri's The Shape of Community Rotating Sculpture Series. No matter what medium you choose to sculpt your masterpiece, you get to use the whole O'Fallon community as your canvas. The Shape of Community invites artists from across the U.S. to have their work installed in prominent outdoor areas of O'Fallon to allow the public to see and interact with their creations. Some have even become permanent installations at sites within the city. Visit o'fallon.mo.us/shapeofcommunity for current examples and for more information on how to submit. So whether you weld it, cast it, or carve it, let the Shape of Community shine a light on your creation. It's time to cast your mold on a city's landscape.
Yes, when you visit their website, you will see that the cast iron art community is very well represented in the group of 10 sculptures presently installed. So you've got a good shot. And we're a little less than 1 year out on the time frame for this call for submissions. So they will be jurying your entries in early March of 2024. Start thinking about what piece from your catalog you want to apply with, or even make a new piece for the deadline. You've got plenty of time. If you have any detailed questions about this opportunity, please contact the Cultural Arts Coordinator, Martin Linson, at mlinson@o'fallon.mo.us. And this really is a great outlet for the iron casting artists to showcase all the big, heavy ironworks that we've been casting. So finally, let's get into this conversation. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and please enjoy. Well, Coral Penelope Lambert, thank you so much for being on the show today. Welcome.
You are welcome. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to share our stories in iron. Really great.
I mean, I'm just so honored that everybody is willing to talk to me and willing to be so open about it. So It's a gift and an honor, and especially today talking to you and how much you've done for the community. It's really, you've been one of the, we've been maybe a year, maybe this interview has been a year in the making.
Yeah, I got busy last year.
Understandably, with the international got pretty busy. So catching up with myself and, having a pretty good summer this year. So good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, let me ask let's just start this, kick this thing off with, Coral, who the hell are you anyways?
Well, sometimes I ask myself that.
Yeah.
I'm Coral Penelope Lambert. I am a British sculptor that immigrated to America in around about 1994 is when I came to America. So I've been here for quite a while. I'm an educator and a maker of sculpture and objects, but I also love the process. So the process of making, the revealing, the magic in that moment is something that really excites me. So yeah, I mean, that's who I am. I live in Alfred, New York. I head up the sculpture program, in specifically the National Casting Center Foundry, and I teach from undergrads all the way through to grad students. And I participate in a lot of the conferences worldwide, and I've chaired conferences and organized residencies and symposiums and all that kind of thing.
Wow. So can I just ask you to clarify for me, because I'm not super familiar with Alfred and the National Casting Center. So can you just explain a little bit about the relationship there?
Yes, Alfred University houses the School of Art and Design and the School of Engineering. It is a SUNY school within a private university. We probably have about 480 art school students. So we're quite a big art school. It's a rural area, very focused on making. We have lots and lots of tools and equipment and spaces. And then when I came here in 2007, my task was to really work on the National Casting Center. So we had a 7,000 square foot facility that was just foundry. We have undergraduate classes in foundry, and I try and attract some really great grad students which have come through the program. Many cool students, so lucky. And actually a few years ago we lost that building, and we are in the process of having a new building on campus. So I've been designing the building. We've just gone to bid. It's another 7,000 square foot building with 2 floors on one side and one really tall floor on the other side. So we'll be able to, we have a foundry right now, but we don't have an induction furnace and 1,000-pound iron furnace and things that we had. So we'll be able to reinstate all of that when that is built. So it's a pretty exciting time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking forward to, and I'm sure everybody in the community is looking forward to seeing how that manifests. Yeah.
So we do iron pours, but mainly small iron pours right now. We used to do the big meltdown every Halloween that would attract a lot of people, because I had the capacity to do really large sand molds and induction furnace and aluminum and bronze and iron all in the same space.
Wow.
So you could do a lot of experimenting with pouring iron and bronze together, or copper and iron, or have an aluminum pour going on at the same time as a big iron pour and a little iron pour. It was crazy. So something had to give, and the thing was that the building, the Alfred University were renting the building.
Oh,
the original people wanted it back, but we fought for it, and we made a case that it was a really important program, which is actually pretty amazing that Alfred University got behind it and have now committed a multi-million-dollar project to get this new foundry going. It's actually pretty amazing when a lot of programs are having their foundry cut or their faculty cut. So I feel really lucky in that support. But, during that process, we reached out to the community. Everybody wrote letters. We really had to build our case.
Yeah, so. But it seems like you did a good job, and you're successful. And then eventually you'll be able to have a place that really is yours. No one will be able to want to take it back. And so
we'll be right on campus with the National Casting Center is cast metal and cast glass. So the glass casting area is literally right next door to the metal casting area. So we've done a lot of classes. I've team taught glass and metal casting with the glass casting professors that have come through. So we've done, that's one thing I like about Alfred, that you can experiment with materials and processes and actually educational systems as well. You get a lot of freedom to do these things.
Yeah. And thank you so much for clarifying that, because I just wanted to know the nitty gritty, and I wanted other people listening to be able to know that how they're connected and the umbrella and all of that detail. So, but I do want to also learn more about you. And so I want to kind of see if you can remember any memories from your childhood that, you feel like played a really large role in helping you develop into the person you are today.
Well, I think the main thing in my childhood that enabled me to be a bit of a risk taker. I flew to America when I was 24 on a one-way ticket. Wow. I did not tell my mom it was a one-way ticket, but I didn't really want to go back to England, but I did it. But what really instilled that sense of adventure was the really great support network of my family, and especially my mom. She would send us, we were not a wealthy family, but we weren't really poor, so I grew up in southeast London, and which is on the edge of London and Kent. So it was very urban area, very small streets and lots of noise and lots of different people around. And we're always encouraged to participate in things. So I would be sent to ballet. No way. Didn't like that. I was sent running. I was sent in a marching band, playing a drum. I was sent to an adventure camp. I was sent everywhere. And it was almost like my mother was throwing mud at me and seeing what stuck, So I was lucky at that. So I'm not scared of trying things, Yeah. So that was very...
And so were any of those camps related to art making or working with your hands, or?
Interesting, because although my family are creative, like my brother was really great at art, he did go off to university to study geography, but there was no artists in my family. My grandmother painted roses and was very good, and so there was that there, but it wasn't like a serious, you're going to do a career of it. So when I went to school, the high school that I went to, most of the trajectory for me at like 17 was to be a secretary or a hairdresser or something, So my typing skills really are quite useful today as a chair. But I had a real problem with that. So I had spiky hair up here. I had black lips. I was a punk. I was a goth. I was, I was something different every day.
Yeah.
And I discovered photography was the first art that I really went and studied after school. And I think photography and then printmaking is something that I find very similar to casting, because there's a process involved.
I understand, yeah.
There's a moment where you kind of lose the image and then the image appears. And sculpture is like this three-dimensional version of that, especially with casting and mold making.
Yeah.
So that's, one of the first sort of art making toys I got was my grandpa's camera, but also my stepfather bought me this old-fashioned press. It was a carbon copier. And I used to sit in my bedroom at night, like just making carbon copy things, making lots of noise. And it's like my secret midnight press.
Yeah.
But so, I grew up in a very supportive, they just wanted me to be happy.
Yeah.
Uh,
So then how did the art kind of come into your life and until to kind of develop into, your career now?
Well, I think it was this, and this is why I want to do this podcast, because I think the stories of how people find art or how they discover it are kind of interesting, because, like I say, even when I talk to my students, they don't really realize that art is a career. And it doesn't mean you don't have to be a teacher of art or a professor of art. You can have a career as an artist. And I think growing up in different situations, you don't really know that, and it's hard to grasp it. So that's something I try and engage with my students. But basically, I ended up at art school because there wasn't anywhere else I wanted to be. So I graduated from high school, and then I went to college, but I didn't know what I was going to learn at college. And we took a tour, and I see students taking tours today, and they don't really know what they're going to get out of art school, but they know they kind of fit there.
Yeah.
And that's so we went into the to the hairdressing school, the beauty school, and I'm like, I don't want to be with you. I don't fit here.
Yeah.
Then we went into the photography area, and I'm like, this is better, And then we went into the painting studios, and I said, this looks like the best that we can do right now, so I'll take this.
A jumping off point.
Yeah, and then it just graduated from there. And that was a pre-foundations course. That was just a local community college that I went to.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't a planned thing.
And sometimes the best things are not planned things.
Exactly.
So go ahead.
You got to keep your eyes open.
Yeah. So can you lead us through the story of from that point in time when you like, okay, painting seems like the closest fit, to then how did you get from there to iron?
Well, that was quite a long story, but quite a number of years. So It probably took me 10 years.
We'll just do a big sweeping story.
Yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can do that for you. So basically, I got my foundations portfolio together and went and did foundations. And in Central School of Art in London, I used to have to carry my massive portfolio on the train every day with all of the secretaries and stuff, and thinking, I could be that, but now I'm this,
Yeah.
So we'd go on the train every day to college. And then I got accepted into Canterbury School of Art, which at that time in 86 to 89, I graduated in 89 with my degree from Canterbury. That was an independent art school. It wasn't attached to a university. And in England at that time, we did not have to pay tuition.
Good.
So I was able to go. So I went to Canterbury School of Art, and I went in for painting and printmaking. And that first year, they allow you to do some projects in other spaces. And then I walked into the sculpture studio and saw the welders. And I this is where I want to be. So from that moment, I spent every day welding. At our school, we had to take a welding course before we could even use the welders.
Okay.
So I had to go to evening school and get a welding certificate, and then you could check out a welder and just basically have a welder in your studio for 2 years. So that's when I really got into metal. I'd make big steel sculptures, and when I left, I was actually invited to be an assistant at Anthony Caro's studio. Sir Anthony Caro, the British steel sculptor.
Mm-hmm.
But being the independent person that I am, I said, actually, I've got my homework to do. Thank you, Sir Anthony Caro. But some people think, you're mad, don't that. But actually, I was fine.
Yeah.
And then I got into grad school in Manchester, at Canterbury, I learned foundry under Richard Rome.
Okay.
Who wrote the book on bronze casting. And I've got a book list that I can share with you.
Oh, I would love that. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, he wrote a big book on bronze casting for the Fine Art Foundry and went on to teach at the Royal College of Art. Unfortunately, he's passed away now. So that's where I got my first foundry. And we did one iron pour there. It was a crucible iron pour, and we just poured it into the sandpit. And that was it. And it didn't really cognize with me. That was interesting, but it wasn't really an iron pour. It was just melting iron in the crucible and pouring it in the sandpit.
Mm-hmm. It was just pouring it straight or pouring it into molds in the sandpit?
You would press a design into the green sand.
Okay.
And then pour it in, but it was very basic. So I learned more investment casting, Italian investment casting.
Yeah.
Where you have an object,
mm-hmm.
and then that object is exactly the same in bronze.
Yeah.
And I wasn't really interested in that. So
but you learned it, yeah.
Yeah, I learned it. But I went on to grad school,
mm-hmm.
Learned more foundry there, but I was really a welder and a fabricator.
Mm-hmm.
And I would be patching stuff together, like making really big sculpture, but like out of lots of little things.
Yeah.
I would go through a reel of MIG wire in a couple of days, just like that. I was big. I had a lot of energy. And again, I learned casting, but traditional investment lost wax process. So then I left school, left college, set up my own studio. I had some commissions and different things that I was doing, some public art projects. And I was trying to work with this foundry, this iron foundry in the north of England, but I didn't really know much about it. And I gave them some investment molds to pour iron into, and obviously they blew up.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. So I need to, I wanted to, always dreamed about going to America. So I applied for some residencies and I ended up at a residency in Minnesota.
Okay.
And I was teaching in England at the time. I was teaching at the Wirral School of Art just outside Liverpool. So I had a pretty good job.
Mm-hmm.
And I went over. I met some amazing people in Minnesota. One of those people is Wayne Potratz. And a friend of mine said, you've got to come to one of these iron pours. So I'd been out of grad school for 4 years.
Yeah.
I went to this iron pour, and there's 50 people dressed up in leathers, all doing these experimental iron pours and open face molds and burning things, and there was a performance afterwards. And I had not seen that because I grew up in England and I went to British art schools and we don't do iron.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it just blew my mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought, this is where I want to be. So I spoke with Wayne and asked if there were any kind of programs, or we talked about doing a Fulbright.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up kind of writing my own proposal as a research fellow in Foundry. And I got that International Research Fellowship in about 94, 95.
Mm-hmm.
And my husband, who is also an artist, he got an International Research Fellow in Electronic Arts.
Uh-huh.
So Paul Heim and myself came over to America then.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
Yeah. But tell us about it. Tell me the details. So was your research done with Wayne at it's U of M?
I took Wayne's classes as a research fellow.
Okay.
So I would sit in on, I mean, I was just like a sponge. I was sitting in on everything. But I was doing my own work. I didn't have to do coursework. So I was doing my own research. I was researching alongside Wayne and helping him a lot as with his research. Obviously he was he was my mentor.
Yeah.
But I learned about the Sugata clay molds, the Japanese tea ceremony clay molds, African clay molds. I dug, one of the first furnaces I built was a pit furnace in the ground that was run with bellows, no electricity. So I was into this sort of low-tech ritual of casting. So the pit furnace I lined up with the setting sun of fire circle with drummers, and then the furnace itself with the pumping bellows, and then the kiln that was the melting out the wax for the molds. And as the sun went down, we lifted the crucible out of the furnace and poured the molds. And I was really interested in, so my research really was about the magic of pouring and the magic of object making. So if you make an object, a cast object in a field with no electricity, just the sun and some people and some different energy, does that object then contain that energy in it? So it resulted in an exhibition of a lot of the work that I made there, which was mainly clay molds, a series of vessels, 12 vessels that were reminiscent of different planets. So the research was looking, for example, at the different metals like iron being associated to Mars, and I did some alloys of bronze and aluminum. That was really beautiful alloy. And then I did a lot of work with patinas and boiling stuff up and being all alchemical,
Yeah.
One book would be this book.
Oh, yeah.
One of the books I discovered at that time. So
can you read the title? Furnaces. I was going to try and read it, but I think I'll do a bad job.
It's by Georgius Agricola, and it is De Re Metallica.
Oh, okay.
De Re Metallica. Yeah, but it's got an amazing diagrams and talks about the iron ore as animal, as a living thing. So that was when I really started to, when my work really was able to speak to some of the things that I'd been illustrating in the steel fabricated work. I would talk about things like, I had a big sculpture called Cosmic Woman, but it was like these cosmic energies I found with metal casting. There's a whole history of myths and legends attached to that idea of, the creation myths of how things exist.
Yeah.
So that's what I was.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of started the next journey,
Yeah. And, it sounds like you had been trained really well and steeped in the traditional, investment molds and that like classic bronze casting. But then this sounds like you had learned all of that, but now then you were digging deeper and in more kind of sounds like primitive techniques as.
Yeah, I like to say ancient techniques. So they're very, they're ancient technology.
Yeah.
And actually some of that ancient technology, the clay molds they're using today in big industry, they're using the clay molds to make manhole covers. And it's a very efficient way because you can recycle the clay.
Oh, that is good.
So I've taught I've taken a lot of what I learned at the University of Minnesota under Wayne and brought that to Alfred with my environmental foundry class, which I haven't been able to teach a lot because you can only do so much, but the environmental foundry class, we would use everything that was local. So the local cow dung, clay, things like that, which is Alfred is perfect for the clay.
It is, yeah. And also Alfred is in upstate New York, right?
Yeah, we're in Western New York. So you go upstate and then you take a left for about 4 hours.
I have to imagine there's a lot of cows up there too.
There are cows.
So you've got the local cow dung, you've got the clay. That's so cool.
Yeah. And so one of my students does demos on that now.
Oh, fantastic.
So it's kind of passing it down.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
Becca Fliss really got into it. And
oh, good.
She goes and does those demos of Sloss and stuff.
Awesome.
So
yeah, I feel like I may have met her this past Sloss. I'll have to look back at my photos, but anyways, okay. So right now where we're at is you had the show with the objects that you created during the Fulbright, the time you spent in your Fulbright.
Yeah, it wasn't a Fulbright. It was a research fellow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
International research fellow.
Okay.
No, it's fine. It's similar to a Fulbright, but it didn't have that funding because our institutions didn't do that at that time. So a lot of things I've done on my path, I've had to kind of create myself. You take the initiative, you figure it out. I had a studio, I had a foundry, I didn't have any money, but I made it work somehow. I don't know how, but
So after that show and that body of work, what happened?
Well, that was a time when I also got into using iron as a performance and also as an educational tool. So around about that time, I think 96 or 98, I built a production furnace. So I built my portable production furnace, which is called Mofra. Moth for the symbol of transformation and Ra for the god and the heat, the sun. Also, Mofra is in Godzilla, which is one of my favorite sort of movies.
Yeah, multi-symbols.
Going around destroying things, but basically, Mofra enabled me to travel and do a lot of these road pours as an independent artist and go and one do performance, one does tiles or sketch blocks for the community. But I was really more interested in, at that time, because I had discovered iron in America, I wanted to bring that back to England. So I did build my own furnace here in America, which I still have, Mofra.
Yeah.
She runs great. Taps out £100, it's a coupolette. And I built an identical one in England at my friend's foundry, Lawrence Edwards foundry in Suffolk, which is near where my father lived. And I started the US-UK residency program.
Okay.
And when I started that, I was really strongly felt that it was not for academics. It was for artists that did not have access to this kind of equipment and facilities, because I had found myself in that position and I had to find a way out of it, So when I did US-UK, one summer it would be in England, and we would bring 5 American sculptors and 5 British sculptors, or actually we've had people from Europe and Africa and China and all over the place. So we just call it US-UK because that was where I was kind of stationed.
Yeah.
We had this Australian guy wanting to do some naked welding demonstrations. But,
yeah,
it was good times. Mm-hmm. So it was a 10-day structure. And then the following year, that same group would come over to America.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah.
That probably created a lot of great relationships.
It created great relationships, and it was good for me because it kept my British side of things active, and I got to meet new sculptors in England, as well as new people in America. And it was very grassroots. I have been very fortunate to find people that are great to work with and really supportive. So I would find host organizations, and it's been hosted at Scottish Sculpture Workshop, Salem Artworks, the old Franconia Sculpture Park under John Hock, and the Berlanderi Sculpture Park, and then also my own place in New Orleans, where I set up my own foundry.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So that's another story.
Yeah. Well, do you want to mosey on over down to New Orleans?
Sure.
In this part of your story?
Yeah. So the part between finishing the International Fellowship at the University of Minnesota, that gave me the tools, build a furnace, doing a lot of road pours, and I was based in Minnesota for maybe 5 years.
Okay.
And I went to do a residency in New Orleans at a place called the Green Project. And that they wanted that they would collect all sorts of debris, like if a house was falling down, they would bring the doors and the wood, and it was a big recycling center.
Okay.
And people could go there and buy things really cheaply. But they had a lot of aluminum, extruded aluminum.
Okay.
And then they had a lot of copper and different things. And the organizers had heard about me and invited me there to they already had a furnace, but they weren't sure how to use it successfully, because when you melt the extruded aluminum, there's a lot of gases that come into it. Like, that is not good cast metal.
Okay.
So you have to add maybe a little bit of copper to give it that density. Like if you just poured the extruded aluminum, you might get shortness in the metal, you might get tears in it. It's not really, you get a lot of gases. But you can use mothballs to degas.
Okay.
Have you heard of that?
No.
Oh, yeah.
But I also am not very casting bronze and aluminum wasn't really something that I was interested in. So there's probably a lot that I haven't heard of. So, but tell me, tell me all the secrets.
Well, if you're melting aluminum, you want to degas it.
Okay. You
can take a mothball in a piece of aluminum and then stick it down in, and it will bubble, and the gases will come out.
Wow.
But you don't want to put too many in because it actually overflows.
Oh, so, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I've learned a lot with experimenting.
It sounds like I can tell.
But basically, got to New Orleans and it was warm. It was, the magnolias smelled beautiful. It was just a magical place. And I thought, I'd really like to move here. So I went back to Minnesota and told Paul, and we're like, okay, let's try it. Let's see what happens. And I had just got a 1 semester residency at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro.
Yeah.
Well, that actually paid pretty well for that at that time. And then I was able to take the risk of setting up a studio in New Orleans. So we went in with some other artists and we bought a 33,000 square foot building. It was massive.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And we hosted, it was a lot of work for 5 years. I did sheetrocking and glazing and putting spotlights up, but we did host resident artists, and we hosted the International Sculpture Conference.
Wow.
We hosted a lot of different events, and I kind of put together. So I was teaching at LSU as a sabbatical replacement.
Okay.
At Louisiana State University. So that helped out a lot with the financial side of things. But at the same time, we put together a program of visiting artists, and then I would also do private workshops with artists that wanted to know about iron or that wanted to make iron sculpture. And then some public art commissions. So we just sort of pieced it together. One of the public art commissions is actually still down there in Algiers, and it's a big cast iron house. It's a cast iron, like the side of a cast iron house, the size of a chapel. That we made. So we did iron pours there. I took Mofra to New Orleans and just carried on doing stuff. And we had US UK there, which was amazing. And one other thing I did there, we did a lot of things there, but one other thing we did was because I'd moved from Minnesota to New Orleans, we started the Snowbird iron pour.
I can understand. Okay, but elaborate on that.
So the Snowbird iron pour took place in January in New Orleans, and all my Minnesota friends would come down to the Snowbird pour.
That sounds fantastic.
Yeah.
What a break for them too, because it's cold for a long time up there, from what I understand.
It is. Yeah. But we met the most beautiful friends up there. We got married at the old Franconia Park, and that's where we sort of started our American journey, which is still on.
So New Orleans, then what happened? And so also at this point, what type of work are you making?
My work has always been large scale. So I was making work in different sculpture parks. So I was making large scale steel sculpture, which also had components of cast iron in it. I did several sort of experimental site specific pieces. So one piece was called the Stimulus, and I made a clay mound while my friend Mark Dixon, a land artist, was digging a hole and putting the dirt out, and then I would make it into a mound. So it was the omphalos and the phallus, basically. And then I wrapped wax around that, like spiral wax. Like you might notice on a lot of my work, I use the spiral, which is a symbol of coiled up energy or potential. So had the wax spiraled up, and then I packed clay around it. So this is all on site, and I'm camping right there, and I'm watching the sun go down and the moon come up and the sun go down. And so this was this monument to and a marker to this sort of rotation, this magnet and whirl. So this sort of stabilized it. And then I built a fire around it, melted the wax out, and then poured iron into it. And it was like a little mini volcano. And that's what really inspired the volcano furnace.
And I think that I've seen the maquette of the volcano furnace at the national conference one year.
Oh yeah, I've shown the maquette. Yeah,
I think so. And maybe may have been photographs to go with it.
Yes, there were probably photos.
But this is now probably six or more years ago, maybe. Yeah,
that's the volcano furnace there. So that's one of my students there, and I think I'm around here. But yeah, we put iron in the top there. This was 2014 for the Latvia conference that took place at Pedvali Sculpture Park.
Wow.
Mm. So that was the work I was doing then. I was looking at site was very important, and time. The moment of the pour was very important. Like when you actually did that activity, started coming to the forefront. I also did some pours where we had a iron furnace outside and a bronze furnace, and we would do iron or bronze and pour those together. So it was a very experimental time looking at alloys and but really thinking about where things come from and how they're made and how they exist and when they exist and how long things exist for. So this marker, the clay stayed inside and then it washed away, and then the iron shell was left.
Yeah.
But just looking at ideas of permanence.
So then now you're in upstate New York. So how did you move from, was it a direct move, or what's other twists and turns along the way?
Well, the twists and turns there is a thing called a weather event called Katrina.
Wow. Yeah.
So
it's not the first time that has come up, obviously, because it was such a huge event. But okay, tell us.
The studio. I'd been in Minnesota for the summer, and I had made this sculpture. Actually, I just made this sculpture.
Wow! And what is this? Is this a Sculpture Magazine, or this is a publication?
Yeah, this is Sculpture Magazine.
And what volume is it? So if somebody wants to,
volume 42.
Okay, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I had the article in there, but basically this sculpture called Thundercloud was made the summer before Katrina hit. So I'm up at Franconia Sculpture Park, and I had Mofra, my furnace, and all my great friends there. And this sculpture was made with a 100-pound furnace. So the idea here is that, yes, you don't need a 1,000-pound furnace. You can make small parts, and yes, you can weld cast iron.
Yeah.
So I made 14 big molds. Each section was 100 pounds over pretty much the whole summer. It was a fellowship there. And on the side of the sculpture, I wrote a poem. And the poem was, riding high on the crest of an eternal wave, thundercloud in the distance, this is our only earth. And the poem talks about this idea of, surfing on a wave and having this fantastic time, and then the crash, and then giving up, and it's like a survival, but always be aware of, like tread carefully, but don't be fearful.
Yes. So great themes to live by.
Yeah. So drove back down to New Orleans. I was sitting in the coffee shop, and I called my good friend Felicia, and I said, "Oh, this is great. This year I've got different visiting artists come in. I've got the workshop. I'm not teaching at LSU. We've got it figured out. We've put the last bit of sheetrock up. We're done." Literally the next day, Katrina came. And my friend called me 10 o'clock on the Sunday morning. They said, "Hey, you and Paul coming out? You better get out now." And I chucked, they said, "We've got a pool up in Baton Rouge." So I chucked my swim costume, my towel. I did take my laptop.
Yeah.
And we did put things up high. I put the welder up high. We put things up as high as we could. It was serious. We had evacuated before for hurricanes. We used to go to Houston.
Yeah.
We would go to Houston, and then it's fine, come back, So if you live in New Orleans, you know that there is this possibility. And sometimes, like, oh, we're just staying here. Anyway, we got the call and they said, Coral, you better come, up to Baton Rouge. So we went up to Baton Rouge, and then it hit and we couldn't go back. So the floor came up, the roof was ripped off.
Oh my gosh.
And a lot of people don't realize that there was actually 2 waves of water. There was Hurricane Katrina wave that came through, and then a few days later there was a smaller one that, because the damage was already there, it came through again. So it waved up and then it came out and then it came in again.
Oh wow.
So you can imagine something like your fridge would come up and then go out, and the fridge ended up in the bedroom. So everything was pretty much destroyed. If it was paper or clothing or digital stuff, that was all destroyed. But one thing, the cast iron work was not destroyed, and the furnace was not destroyed. It was just bent a little bit. The wind belt was bent because a bit of the building fell on it.
Wow.
Yeah, so I still got the dent in the furnace, which is fun. That's where Katrina hit it.
Wow.
And you got the Katrina patina.
Okay. Yeah.
I've still got some in my studio, actually. It's like a watermark on a piece of copper that goes up.
Wow.
But yeah, it was a pretty bad hit. And, that's another reason why the cast iron community is pretty amazing, especially the sculpture community, because people came out, not physically came out to help us because nobody was allowed in.
Yeah.
But they offered us places to stay. They offered us jobs. We were very, very lucky in the fact that we had options, like we could go to different places and continue our work or pick up the pieces. Whereas a lot of people in Katrina did not have that option.
Yeah.
And probably haven't even been able to return because the city changed so much.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and it's like I can nod my head and I can say, but it's really, I know nothing about it. And I had no idea that this was part of your story.
Yeah. Well, so after being an international fellow at the University of Minnesota, I applied for, you could only get a visa for so long. And then I applied for what's called an O1 visa, which is an artist of extraordinary ability. And they give it to athletes, and, you have to be an expert in your field. So I got the O1 visa. I had to get 20 letters of reference from people around the world to say, that I knew what I was talking about.
But you got it because it's true.
Yeah, so I got
you deserved it.
And then after I got the O1 visa, you could apply for a green card. So we got the green cards. But because of this, and because I have the O1 visa, the British government knew about my whereabouts.
Yeah.
So they knew that me and Paul were here or there or whatever. So we're in Baton Rouge after Katrina, and there's a knock on the door of my friend. She was a professor at LSU, the painting professor.
Yeah.
And they knock on the door and they said, is Coral Lambert and Paul Hyam there? And they're like, yeah. Well, I'm the London Independent, and I've been sent by the British government to see if you're okay and to interview you.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So there was this big article in the. We didn't really want to do it because we didn't feel right about doing it.
It seems a little.
Yeah, it's like there's people drowning, there's people, homeless, and we just did this. He said, well, I can get you into New Orleans to see your studio because we're the press. So we got waders on, and we went in to see the studio. And it was pretty horrific. Not the studio, not losing things, just the scenes that we saw. of, you know,
The disaster.
the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, the disaster. So, yeah, then we moved to New York. Paul got offered a job at NYIT, doing digital sculpture.
Okay. Yeah.
And we developed the digital foundry course. And this was, you know, we would go from the virtual to the real. So he would do the all of the virtual stuff, and then we would either CNC it or do the rapid prototype, and then do ceramic shell or sand mold.
And so this is early too. This is 2005, 2006?
2006 was the first time we taught Digital Foundry.
Wow.
And we've been doing it a few times since then. We've taught it about 3 or 4 times at Alfred.
Yeah.
And it's something that's normal now, but yeah, we were doing it.
But then
we were doing it with Paul's work in New Orleans. We were probably doing it in about 2000.
Okay.
Taking the filament was ABS plastic, so it was a little bit more difficult than the filament now, which is a vegetable base filament.
Yeah.
So yeah, we did Digital Foundry. So that's what brought us up to New York.
Okay.
And then we were in a situation, because we lost everything.
Yeah.
That we kind of had to start at zero. And I'm like, I'm going to have to go to get a proper teaching job or something. So that's why I ended up at Alfred. But it was the best situation. Yeah, it's great.
Good.
It was one of those ones where, you know, like if I have students or friends applying for teaching jobs and they get no, it's just about a good fit, you know. And if it's not a good fit for them or for you, then you're not going to be happy in that position anyway.
Yeah.
So when you walk into a place and you think, yeah, this looks like home to me, these people are great, and I can bring my energy to this place, then it's a good fit. And, you know, but you might have to wait a while. I had 20 applications out that year.
Wow. Yeah. That's cast a wide net.
Yeah, I had 20 applications out for full-time tenure-track professor jobs. Yeah. Some of them weren't tenure-track, but I got 2 interviews and I had to pick between, which was, again, you know, it's really fortunate. I picked between, it was either Chicago or Alfred. Chicago had 1 furnace, Alfred had 3. I'm like, I'm coming here.
Yeah.
It had we have an induction furnace, so I was able to really carry on the work that I wanted to make, which was all of those 3 areas, like the large-scale sculpture, experimenting with performance work, and that how does the process of cast iron become an artwork rather than just a spectacle?
Yes.
So I grappled with that a while, and I think the most successful piece that I've been able to turn the spectacle actually into an object afterwards is the Starry Starry Night performance. But with Starry Starry Night, I'd been to Salem Artworks a lot since 2007, when I did US UK there, and I introduced my students to Salem Artworks in 2007 at the first intercollegiate iron pour, which is now the Festival of Fire. So I'd been going there a lot, and Anthony, the director, Anthony Kaffritz, had invited me to do performance. And it's a lot of work to do performance. So I said, well, maybe not this year. And then the next year, I had figured it out what I wanted to do. So I wanted to do something at dawn, because that is a place where everybody's camping out.
Yes.
And it's easy for people to get up at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to start the furnace.
Mm-hmm.
So I got up at 4 in the morning. Actually, Marshall from Alabama came up to help with the furnace, which was amazing.
Yes.
And I lit the furnace at 3 to do the burn-in. Pitch black. It was great. I just had a little headlight on. I just lit the furnace myself. It was fabulous. And then around about 5, students and different volunteers came from all different colleges because it was the intercollegiate for. They came out their tents, and then we charged the furnace and we cast probably about 50 iron stars.
Wow, 50.
Then carried them up to this horizon line.
Yeah.
And planted them. And then as the sun came up, it extinguished the stars. They became, So that was, and then the stars actually stay there as an outdoor observatory.
Yeah.
So you can go visit the site. Yeah. And people will tell you the story of how they were created. And then you can sit there and watch the sun come up, or you can watch the sun go down, or you can watch the moon. So that was in, I think, 2019 that I did that piece.
Wow. Yeah. And so let's see. So in 2019, you had been working at Alfred for over 10 years at that point?
Yes,
or almost?
I started working here in 2007.
Yeah. So over 10 years. Yeah. And so then from there, I mean, obviously then there was the pandemic in 2020. So we're almost caught up to where you are now. Is there anything that we missed, or is there anything that we glazed over that you want to highlight?
Yeah, just talking about the other furnaces. So the other furnace that was important, these experimental furnaces, like the seeping furnace I built, was a precursor to the volcano furnace. So the seeping furnace I built between Minnesota and New Orleans. So I was still traveling back and forth. And the furnace I would start with a wax sculpture, and then I would have a tap hole in wax sticking out of it. So imagine like a belly, or like an in vitro belly shape with all these tubes kind of coming out of it. So you had a tap hole, a slag hole, a blower, a tap, slag, blower. So spiraling around the wax sculpture was tap, slag, blower, tap, slag, blower.
Okay.
You pack some chicken wire and refractory around it.
Okay.
And then you melt out the wax and you've got your hollow sculpture. So you're really treating the furnace as a mold, which I am casting a sculpture in. So then you put your blower on and you start charging. And as soon as iron starts coming out the first tap hole, you bod it up.
Okay.
And then you move everything up. And then iron starts coming out the slag hole, you bod it. And then you move the blower up. So is that you are making a sculpture in vitro.
Wow. Yeah.
So that was a fun kind of failure, because by the time we got up to the third or fourth hole, it all disintegrated. But that was very informative in me kind of playing with those ideas of freezing the moments, like embracing the idea of the inside of the furnace, like what is happening inside the furnace.
Yeah.
And that being an interesting sculptural making process or matrix that can be an artifact of something. And the thing that spurred me into doing that, looking at the artifact, was this discovery of these like cast iron tree stumps in China. And basically it was where everybody really during the time of Mao had a small furnace in their backyard.
Common.
Yeah, for the good of the empire. everybody was making. So they'd have a little furnace in the back, probably coal-fired instead of coke-fired or charcoal.
Yeah.
And it resulted in these artifacts that were like little tree stubs of cast iron and coke.
Huh.
So, and that vision just stayed with me, so I wanted to play with that.
So that was the remnants of the inside of their personal furnaces?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
They had stopped using them and they'd just frozen.
Huh.
And when
Okay.
you go to a lot of the furnace sites like Scranton or Ironbridge in England and look at the old furnaces, you get that wonderful like slag iron lump that's left at the bottom of the furnace.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the lining is gone, so you got the brick, and then you've got the slag, and then all the moss and everything on that. So that's something that stayed with me from that time.
Yeah.
And that's what my volcano furnace probably looks like right now. It's like because it froze inside, and then when the iron flowed through the lava tubes, the iron came down and cast into rock. Then the lava tubes collapsed. They were only designed to last for that moment, and then it pretty much collapsed in on itself as we were doing it.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there any way that you can follow up on that and see it? Is there any contacts to?
Yeah. I've got photographs of it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
I've got photographs of it, and we 3D scanned it.
Oh.
I'm not. It has been 3D scanned, and I've made miniature versions of it, which you've probably seen in different exhibitions. But, I do have photos of it. I probably have some photos of the dormant furnace on my website.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah. I'll put a link at in the show notes in the bottom, and we'll include that.
And I'll give you that book list.
Yes, and so for everybody that's listening to the audio only version, they'll be able to follow up on the book that you mentioned earlier, and
cool.
Have that as a resource.
Yeah.
So now we're in. Now is now. I still, I want to make sure that we capture everything, and so that last performance and then artifacts that were produced, the starry. Can you tell me the title of the piece again? The Stars?
Starry Night.
Okay. And so that was in 2019. And so that's how you were incorporating cast iron in your art then. And so is there an elaboration on that? It's in these past years, or anything else that you want to talk about for cast iron in your art practice now?
I mean, Starry Night started previously with a piece called Ferris Bloom, which I did in Germany. And then I did another version of it at Alfred, where it was very choreographed. And we used colored smoke and trying to go to this other world, this sort of, not an underworld, but this moment between twilight, between dusk or dawn, but trying to create that sort of feeling again.
Yeah.
And that sort of disorientation, because one thing that happens at iron pours, once you're in the middle of it, you are just doing furnace time. The furnace starts, you're doing it, especially at really long pour, where you might be pouring at 2 a.m. And a lot of times that happened with some of the symposium pours, because people get really ambitious and you're making a lot of work. And
molds come out of the woodwork.
Pouring. You get started, you're pouring. One time up at the North Shore pour, where I also built a furnace for a group of artists called Common Ground, and they just really loved iron and invited me up there to make a furnace very similar to Mofra. We called it Aurora because we could stay up at night and watch the northern lights. anyway, we were a pretty small group. So we were pouring, and getting very tired. So I'm like, okay, we're just going to stop. And everybody was freaking out because they're like, well, if we stop, what about all these molds? I said, well, have you not heard of a breakfast pour? You know, we're going to stop. We're going to, just chill out for a bit. Everybody's really tired. We don't want any accidents.
No. Yeah.
And then we got up in the morning, we chipped out the furnace, relined it, and we had a beautiful little 3-hour pour in the morning and finished off all the molds.
Wow. Yeah. Much better, much smarter.
Much better. But this idea that you do have to stay up all night and pour, I think, you grow out of that, But I did several precursors to Starry Starry Night. And now, since I've done that, I did one more performance pour at the Berlin conference. And that was interesting experience because I proposed something, and then when I got there, the site was completely different. And I really wanted to honor the site and the iron workers that had been there before. So I really simplified the performance, and I had one of my grad students, Gabby Egnider, with me, and just the two of us, we just dragged this heavy, hot cast iron object along these tracks where they had done production for many, many years. And so we were echoing and walking in the footsteps of the workers. So that was an interesting performance because I had proposed something much more elaborate, and I really enjoyed scaling it back down to this, just dragging this thing down, and we were whipping it, and it was very spontaneous. And so some of that I'm still kind of processing, what that was, but I am preparing a new performance. And a lot of my iron pour performances are accompanied by electronic sound by Paul Heim. So we are doing the next Festival of Combustion performance pour at Carey Furnaces in Pittsburgh. And it's called Ferrum Lux, which means iron light. And I'll be using the iron to cast these iron shapes, maybe like diamonds, which I've done some diamond shapes before because I'm interested in this element of time and speeding up the work of nature. And the diamond is something that really embraces that idea. Yeah. So these diamond shapes, we're going to pour iron into the diamond shape open face mold. And then there'll be some electric connectors. Once the iron is solidified, it will light up some neon pieces. So these neon pieces are like big spirals. There'll be 3 of those, accompanied with sound, but also the colored smoke, which I use to douse the space. And hopefully my students will participate and be walking with the stars and the smoke bombs. At the same time, I'm walking through the crowd.
So it sounds like it's going to be you creating an atmosphere and a mood.
Yes, and it will be in conjunction with the fireworks that will be going off in the historic site. So the backdrop is the Carey furnace, the massive Carey furnace, historic furnace, and then these neon spirals with the diamonds and smoke, and then Paul is doing these electronic industrial sounds that he's collected from the site and the trains that are going by.
Oh, great.
So, it's only going to be 45 minutes, but it will be a really nice, sweet performance, Paul. We just got to hope that it doesn't rain, because I was going to do this iron neon at Sloss Furnaces when we had the lightning storm.
Oh yeah, in 2019.
Yeah. So I had the neon and the light and the iron.
That was a tragedy.
It was an electric storm. Yeah. We're not gonna risk it.
No. It's not going to rain. I mean, we might as well just put it out in the universe.
It's not going to rain.
It's not going to rain. So that sounds like, I mean, that's hot on the horizon. Immediately hot on the horizon this coming fall. I want to make sure that we didn't miss any of these kind of there. A lot of these questions are optional questions, but we talked a lot about the history of you incorporating iron into your artistic practice, which is great. We talked about a lot of your furnaces. And so this is, I feel like it's a little sometimes silly of a question I feel like asking, but what do you love the most about iron casting?
Oh, yeah. Well, the whole iron casting thing was a little bit of a surprise because if you listen to my history, I was set on being a steel sculptor. I tried blacksmithing. That wasn't for me. I like doing the fabricating and the cutting and the welding. And so when I discovered iron, it is the material specifically and the history of the material. It is so rich. It is in our blood. It is in the core of the earth. It is stardust. It is all of those magical things, but it's also all of the industrial everyday things. So those two sides are something that really I love to grapple with things. So I love the challenge of how those two characters of iron can exist together.
Yeah.
The magical and the ordinary.
Yeah.
You take a cast. Some of the first castings I made were these divining rods. So I just get a twig, that's split in the Y, and I would get they had to be a certain size and shape and fit in your hand.
Yeah.
So I would get a branch and cast it in iron, and that idea of a divining rod being able to have some energy and measure things, and so that was some of the first work I did with iron was the divining rods. And then that extended into the brooms. I don't know if you've seen my broom series, like the Magic Broom series that I started in New Orleans. I was working one night in the studio and there was a full moon, and I kept feeling that there was somebody else in the studio. I was working by myself. And every time I turn around, I see the moon, and then this broom was standing there. And I'm like, just the nice wicker brooms, classic
broom.
Okay, I'm going to get you and I'm going to ram you up in this mold. So I made the Magic Broom series, and everywhere I went, I would borrow people's brooms. And my friend Roberto gave me his mother's broom from Africa to cast, and I got brooms from China when I visited, and so everywhere I went I was collecting brooms, and people still give me brooms sometimes. But there's a great that's why I like iron, because it has these two very, very powerful opposite ideas of the industrial and the everyday, like the manhole covers, and then the magical ore from the ground, the magma, these kind of
the blood, the
blood of those things. So those two opposites really
encompassed in one material that then we can. I mean, we can't control it, but we can,
So if you want to talk about the environment, or you want to talk about the unknown, or if you want to bring some other conversation about how humans exist, iron is a pretty interesting material to work with process-wise, but also as an artifact or an object. So I'll still do my steel work, and then I'll put some iron on it. And then, so iron as a material is interesting. And then iron casting as a community is extremely rewarding and pleasurable to be a part of. The number of people I've met and continue to meet, I don't want to be general about it, but it does attract a certain kind of person that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And they're like down to earth, but they're also really creative, and they're practical, but they're wild.
Good problem solving, but also able to go with the flow, not afraid of getting dirty, not shy away from physical labor. I mean,
and in some of my talks that I've put together over the years, I'll talk about iron and fuel usage and those kind of things. But I think my most recent interest is talking about the idea of fire, and that we are fire people on a fire planet. And since the discovery of fire, that's like the ignition of something.
Yeah.
So there's several books like Edwin Black's Internal Combustion, which talks about fuel usage. So as an iron caster, thinking about those kinds of ideas of using fuel and heat to do things faster or slower, or like speed up the work of nature. How can we melt iron but slow it down a bit? And that's why I thought the Starry Night was so successful, because it was taking this kind of fiery, fierce, productive thing and slowing it down in relation to the sun coming up. And really, the feedback that I got from that piece for the people that were actually there at dawn, watching the sun come up and watching the stars go up, was they said it was really moving. So
I believe it. I believe it.
I'd like to recreate that piece. I'd like to do it with more people on a longer horizon line somewhere. So I'm keeping an eye out for
I was going to say, if you want to do it, I bet it'll happen.
Yeah, we'll try and make it happen.
Yeah. And let's okay, so I'm going to revisit some of these last questions. I mean, and some of these are just kind of, I don't want to say they're filler questions, but it's kind of, if I ever got to the end of a episode interview and we hadn't talked for long enough, these are kind of questions that are optional, but so this is an interesting one. Can you tell us of a worthwhile personal investment that you've made, either tools or time, or a learning experience that you feel like really benefited you or your artistic practice or your students? Does anything pop into your head?
Well, I think if you think about yourself or my practice, the best investment was making my own furnace that was portable, and I could pour, like, even now if I lost my job, whatever, I'd still got my furnace.
Yeah.
I'm still good.
Yeah. And people email me from the internet asking me to cast things, and I don't even have a furnace. So it's like, you can make money with a furnace.
It's a very empowering thing, not only to make money, but also you can share that knowledge. You can always you can use it for educational things. So
teach workshops.
Having your own furnace, iron furnace, is great, because you can also facilitate your own performances. You can put whatever you like in it. One time I went to a pour and I wanted to put iron and copper into a furnace, and they wouldn't let me. So I'm like, they're worried about it, blocking the furnace, but it was fine. I did want to put 50 pounds of copper in. So I would put 50 pounds of iron and 50 pounds of copper, and you get this beautiful, I mean, I did do it with my own furnace, but you get this beautiful iron and copper, like a marble cake.
Oh.
So you can experiment with your own furnace. And actually my furnace, the Mofra furnace, I can take the wind belt section off. I can put a grate under it, and I can make it into a flash out kiln. And I put the lid on. I can also take the bottom part no, the stack, sorry, and the lid, and I've made a bottom part to it where I can make it into a bronze furnace, like a crucible furnace.
Yeah.
So it's completely like compartmentalized and
Multi-purpose. Yeah.
yeah, it can be a flash out, it can be a iron furnace. It can also put a stack on it. It can be a cupola. Mm-hmm. It can be a cupola and a cupola. So I think really valuable as a young sculptor to get your tools, but know your tools and make them yourself so that you can make them your size for what you want. Mm-hmm. You know, the Mofro, it's the right height to put the iron in. I can take it apart. I can chip it out and lift it myself. I can fit it in my truck. So it's like, you know, it's my own portable furnace.
Yeah.
And then advice, the other really beneficial thing is traveling, being able to travel. And you get to a point where you don't necessarily have to do it because you're like, oh, I've been there, I've done that. But one time I didn't want to go somewhere. I'm not going to say where it was, but I was like,
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Really want to go there. I'm so tired. I don't want to get on a flight and fly internationally. And, you know, it sounds like a spoiled child, but it's like,
well, no, it's
I was so tired. I'm like, I could just pull over and sleep in this shack for a week, you know. So, like teaching really takes it out of you. Yeah. So it's the end of semester. I had to fly off somewhere. But obviously I had to go. So I went and I got there and it was brilliant. I'm like, I'm so glad I came, you know, and there's nothing like getting out of your own space, meeting people. You don't need necessarily a lot of money, but there are ways to raise money. It's really surprised me throughout my career how supportive people are. You know, if you say what you need, then it's amazing what happens, you know?
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to ask for stuff.
So it sounds like we kind of rolled into the advice portion. Is that what?
Yeah, this could be advice.
Well, do you have any more advice? Honestly, the advice section is one of my favorite. I mean, hearing people and when they first get introduced to iron and that moment, like when you talked about the very first iron pour that you experienced with the people in the leathers. And I love, that's my favorite part, but then also hearing everybody's advice, because I feel like everybody has something different to give and I learn from every single guest. And so if you have any more advice, I'd love to hear it.
Well, I think one is definitely always ask. Ask for advice, reach out to someone that you trust and ask them. A lot of times I haven't done that in the past and I've just gone and done stuff and I'm like, oh, I wish I knew that I could have done this or that, you know. So people are very giving of their time and they want other people to succeed. Just go for it. don't hold back. You know, I was in England, I was told no a lot with my crazy ideas. Like, oh no, you can't do that, Coral, that's crazy. Like, you can't blow that up, or you can't make that mold that big, or you can't, you're not going to be able to do that because it's too expensive or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think coming to America, it really opened my eyes to the possibilities. You know, there are spaces here that you can do experimental things and learn like your own way. Not that you need to ignore all of the books and the technical advice and everything, but it's like you take that technical knowledge and apply it and ask questions of it. And there's still things to discover.
Yeah.
You know, it might be like, oh, that's already been done. But no, there are still things to discover. And even if it's you discovering something that already exists, you're going to see it in a different way.
I love that. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you for that. I love it. All right. So if you're ready, I think we're ready to jump on over to the after show. But is there anything else iron related or cast iron stories that you want to share kind of with the public audience?
Well, there's a lot.
I know there's so much.
I think I'll look forward to meeting some of you in person, and then we can chat about them.
That sounds like a good plan.
I'll see you at the next Iron Conference, or at the next Sculpture Park install.
Well, hopefully a lot of people will attend the Festival of Combustion at the Carey Furnaces. And so do you know the dates off the top of your head? I can look them up and put it on.
October 7th.
October 7th
is the Festival of Combustion.
I really, really regret that I'm not going to be able to swing it, especially now that I've heard about your upcoming performance.
Yeah, October 7th.
All right. Well, everybody get over to Carey Furnaces. Well, so let's see. So I kind of do like to tease a little bit about what we want to talk about in the after show. And so, and usually the after show is good for a specific story or specific, if you wanted to detail a specific iron pour or a specific memory, but I have got some little optional questions that might trigger your fancy. So what was your favorite place to pour iron, or your favorite iron pour memory? Or, some people kind of like to live on the edge and talk about what's the worst thing that's ever happened to them, or scared that they've been at iron pour. But some people don't like to talk about the bad stuff. They like to keep it fun. So what's the funniest thing, or a funny story related to iron casting, or your favorite type of molds? Like, does any of that, could you tease a little bit about what we might talk about in the after show?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about the Midsummer's Night at Pedvalley Sculpture Park with the volcano furnace and some of the other performances that were at the International Cast Iron Conference in Latvia in 2014. So I think there were some scary moments, there were some magical moments, and there were some pretty phenomenal iron pour moments in that.
Oh, yes. I'd love to hear it, because I unfortunately wasn't able to make it to that. And I think a lot of people did go, but a lot of us, international travel is tough. And so I think that it'll be a great service to all of us that didn't get to attend to hear your firsthand experience. So let's go on over to the after show. So for the public audience, I want to just, in front of everybody, thank you, Coral Penelope, for letting me interview you today. It's been a delight to hear about your life and your iron art.
Thank you so much. I hope that it came across okay.
Oh, yes. This has been fantastic. I feel like full of energy, like a wound up spiral, ready to.
Awesome iron.
Yes.
In the after show.
Yeah.
Well, I can talk about some little tiny, like, what is the tiniest iron furnace?
Yeah, I love talking about tiny iron furnaces. We'll save it for that, but I'm going to say goodbye to everybody who's watching and listening, but the conversation doesn't have to end here. You can come on over to the after show with us. You just go to Patreon, sign up. This after show will be there. And then all of the after shows from all the other episodes are there. So you can catch up if you're just signing up now. But if you're already a Patreon subscriber, thank you so much. And we'll see you over there. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This conversation doesn't have to end here. To gain access to the after show where Coral and I continue our discussion, visit the website patreon.com/thepodcastiron. And there, supporters at any contribution level get access to the after show recordings from every episode that's ever been published. So if you're new here, the after show is just an extra 15 to 20 minutes, sometimes more, with each show's guest, where we talk a little more candidly and share at least one more story behind the privacy of a paywall. So if you sign up now, you'll get access to listen to Coral's after show and all of the other after shows from all of the other earlier guests. And if you like what I'm doing with this project and want to support the show, this really is the best way to do it. For as little as $1 a month, I mean, you can contribute more if you want to, but even $1 really makes a difference to help subsidize the costs that I undertake to make this resource publicly available, and you'll get the after shows. So it's a win for everyone. Well, in conclusion of the public portion of this episode, I hope you enjoyed listening to this interview. The conversation was tremendously rewarding for me, and I feel inspired and hope that one day my story will be as interesting as Coral's. I also can't wait to see what she's got in the works and what she accomplishes in the years to come. Coral, thank you for going out of your way to prioritize this interview into your schedule, because I know you're busy. So it really means a lot to me that you believe in this project, and thank you for everything that you've done to help it grow. I'm sending best wishes and good vibes for your performance next month, but I know it's going to be great. I'm really disappointed that I have to miss it, but I hope that I'll be able to see another one of your performances sometime soon. And now to thank our top supporters for helping me afford to continue offering this show. Crescent Creative, thank you for being a top supporter of the podcast Iron. And also, thank you for demonstrating how artists can create an interesting and inspiring living for themselves by producing custom client work. You are a great role model for many of us. Thank you to the Western Cast Iron Art Alliance for being a top supporter of this show. I am so honored and encouraged to have your support, and thank you for all the work that you do in service of the Western region of the US and its cast iron artists. And thank you, Sloss Metal Arts, for being a top supporter of the podcast and also for your year-round work as a national center for iron casting and metal arts, and for offering our community resident artist opportunities. So yes, in closing, thank you to all of our top supporters and all of our individual supporters on Patreon. The funds that everybody contribute are invaluable to help me to continue to afford producing this show. But if you don't have it in your budget to support the podcast Iron on Patreon, I totally understand. Instead, if you could please share the podcast with someone you think would be interested in listening or watching, and I'll appreciate that just as much. Anything and everything helps, and for that I say thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you want to get in touch with me, you can email me at thepodcastiron@gmail.com. Thanks again for listening and watching. I'm sending you all my love always, and I can't wait to share the next episode with you. I'll talk to you soon, and have a great day.